Hello there, Robert Donatis here from GemT International. Thank you for tuning into this month's podcast. Again, we've searched far and wide to bring exciting people to you and interesting topics to the table. People who can think outside the treatment cubicle and make the most of their profession. And hopefully it inspires you, and hopefully you enjoy this month's edition of the GemT podcast. Hi there, listeners. Robert Donatis here from GemT International. I don't often get nervous to run our podcasts, but today I'm amongst some friends and some amazing, fantastic female physios from Brisbane in Queensland, Australia. Good morning, Jess Clary.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. I'm here also with Alice Walker.
Salama Pagi.
Oh, Salama Pagi. Well done to you. She's topical and she's right on point. So a little bit of background for the listeners. Deb and I flew in last night to a place called Makassar in South Sulawesi in Indonesia. And next weekend, we're running a course for 20 neurologists, teaching them GemT dry needling and its applications in pain management and also spasticity. So working with MS and stroke patients. So well done to you, Alice. You must have seen one of our newsletters. No, a very proud moment for us. First time to Indonesia, haven't seen too much of it just yet, but we got in quite late last night, and because of the time difference, you got me up quite early this morning, but it'll be well worth it. Now, our themes this year for podcasts has been outside the cubicle, e.g. How have some of our GemT graduates forged careers outside the treatment cubicle? We started with Harry from Perth, who was a fly-in, fly-out physio, working with Rio Tinto. That was very exciting. Went to Ange Hubbard, who converted a caravan, had some government funding and took health services into rural and regional New South Wales. And she had some amazing stories to tell. And then last month we had Kayla, who's one of our GemT instructors. And when I asked her to help us as an instructor, I'd never seen anyone get so excited. So we interviewed her as well, and she just talked about the opportunities and the travel that have been involved with that. So, and we're actually flying someone else in from Malaysia to join us on our course this weekend, because I need an interpreter, because Salama Pagi, Alice, is about all I can say as well. All right, let's go through. And the reason why we have both Jess and Alice here today is because they've carved out and forged very successful careers outside the cubicle. They both work in professional sport, with a game that Australia made up themselves called Aussie Rules Football. And the competition is called the AFL, Australian Football League. Men have been playing it for well over 100 years, and they've been professional or semi-professional for maybe half of that. And the women's national competition started up, and chime in, guys, if my facts are wrong, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I think they're about to start their 8th season. Is that right, Alice? Is that right?
I think it's our 10th season.
10th, is it?
But
Okay.
we've been, inaugural season was sort of 2017.
Okay.
But there's been a couple of double years.
Oh, yeah. And then you missed a year or two as well, didn't you, with COVID? Or
COVID interrupted and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay. So they've been around, they're relatively new, been around for 10 years, but now they're becoming very professional and semi-professional with their athletes as well. So Alice, correct me if I'm wrong, Alice works full-time with the AFLW teams, the Australian Football League women's team called the Brisbane Lions. And so she works full-time there as the head physiotherapist. In her spare time, she's completing her master's as well. And in any spare time, she spends it with her little boy, Freddie, who's now 4 years old. Jess, you've been a physio for just over 10 years. I think you had 1 season with the women's team. Is that right?
I actually did 3 seasons with the women's, over 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, I love it when my facts are wrong. So it's 3 seasons, 3 seasons with the women's team. Did 2 of you work together for a year as well?
For that whole time we worked together, yeah.
For that whole time, good. And I believe Nikki was involved at some stage.
Nikki's worked for us as well, yeah.
Yeah, she speaks very highly of you both. So Jess has completed your masters. You did that 3 or 4 years ago, and you work full time with the men's team. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. And that is just amazing and fantastic achievements for both of you. So, can I ask, do either of you ever play football?
I haven't. despite spending a fair few years of my childhood in Victoria. I was just followed it because my family are very into AFL, so I just grew up watching it.
And
But Alice has.
Alice, yeah?
I've dabbled in my early 30s, had a crack, and actually became an ACL statistic.
Oh, nasty.
Yeah.
And
I was actually a volleyballer and a cricketer, so probably should have stayed in my lane.
and with your height, were you playing in the ruck?
I was playing in the ruck.
Playing in the ruck. Look, it's interesting. I'd love to talk about the ACLs, and we might get onto that in a moment, because I was involved with the next level down, VFLW, and it was mainly the cross-coders that got into all the trouble. Those had been playing netball all their lives and thought it'd be a good idea to come across, or basketball. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Anyway, so you've both played a bit of footy, which is great, so you understand it. And you understand the adrenaline you get in your system when you kick a goal. Have you kicked a goal, Alice?
You know what? Sadly, no.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
I've kicked a goal in the warm-up on the MCG, but
well
that
done.
doesn't count. Not in a game.
No, it does. It does. It does, because this is not meant to be about me, but I was a physio for our state rugby union team, and we were the curtain raiser at the MCG for Australia versus New Zealand. So 95,000 people, and we did the curtain, and I took the warm up on the MCG. And as we were finishing, I grabbed the rugby ball and kicked it through the uprights, so I could tell people I kind of kicked a goal on the MCG. There wasn't 4 posts, but I'm going to claim that. And there was probably 30,000 people there. No one cheered, but that's another story on another day. All right. All right. So Jess, you've worked across both teams.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to ask you this. What's the difference between working with a men's team and a women's team? Is there a difference in, I guess I'm leading into a story because I've worked with both at the next level down, but is there much of a difference in gratitude, appreciation, their willingness to listen to you or take on your advice? Is there any difference?
I'd say the biggest difference is more just personality wise. And when I was in the women's, and even now, those girls are working so hard to develop and become equal to the men's program. So they're just desperate, but desperate in a good way to do everything right. So they want to tick all the boxes. Whereas the men's, it's established. So sometimes they can take some things for granted, but I'm lucky enough, like the group that I work with now and have had experience with, they're all as appreciative as each other. You've obviously got some challenging athletes at times, but they're challenging because they want to be the best version of themselves, not because they're trying to be difficult to you.
Gotcha.
So,
Jess, that was, I don't need to then chime in because that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. So I've worked with a men's team for literally 30 years. And then 5 years ago, a women's team was introduced to the club. And so same club rooms, same change rooms that I've been going to for years. And all of a sudden now I'm involved with the women's team. I'll never forget my first training session with them. And towards the end, there were 2 ladies just standing near the end of the table. I thought they were waiting for me. So I finished with the last athlete and I looked up and said, "How can I help you?" Now it's 8:45, everyone wants to go home. I said, "How can I help you?" And they said, "Oh no, we just want to thank you for coming down." And I went, "Pardon?" "We just want to thank you for coming down. We know how busy you likely are." And they didn't even have any treatment from me. No guy has ever stayed back to thank me at the end of training at 8:45 on a cold winter's night. And I just went, wow. But their passion for knowledge was amazing and refreshing, almost to their detriment, because most of them knew that everyone else in the room knew more than them. And they'd be talking to the water boy about what should I have done or something. And I'd be going, and I end up having to tell them, "Hey, listen to your coaches." And I was in charge of the medical team. And I had to tell my staff and trainers, I said, "Guys, stop giving them advice. Okay, it's not our role. Stick to your lane. You're here to strap ankles, and you might know more about football than this girl who's just come across from volleyball, but it's not our role." So keeping people in their lanes was something that I had to work hard on. But that's interesting that you said a lot of that. Alice, let's start with you. Can you tell me when did you decide working with a sporting team is for me? and what pathway did you put yourself on to achieve that? Not many things happen by luck in this world. You've got to be ready, you've got to be professional, you've got to be prepared for opportunities that present themselves. So when did you decide, wow, I love working with sporting teams, and this is what I need to do to achieve that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I was quite lucky. Even though you say it's rare for that to happen, I probably always wanted to work in sport. But I found myself working in a hospital private clinic in our outpatient department, so a private practice in a sense within a private hospital, straight out of uni, and quickly worked out musculoskeletal sports was where my passion was. So found a way to secure a position there without rotating in the hospital. So just made myself irreplaceable. Just kept doing PD that made me difficult to rotate. And that's where I met Nikki Rathbone, who's a GMT supervisor.
And a local legend.
Yes. And she at the time was working for the Queensland Fire, so the cricket team, the women's cricket team, and I'd actually been a state junior cricketer, so actually I still knew a lot of those athletes and some of the people working in the staff as well.
Yep.
And so she fell pregnant, and she thought, oh, what am I going to do? I love this job. I don't want to lose it. And I said, oh, you know what? I'll cover for you when you need to go on mat leave. And it's your job, and I'll just fill your boots for the season.
Yep.
And so to prepare for that, I just started volunteering down at the Academy men's AFL actually. I had a friend who was working there, and I knew the head physio, and she was just giving me experience, and I was basically helping out in a voluntary capacity just to build a little bit more sports knowledge, and so that I had a mentor then that I could go to from a sports capacity. And then Nikki, as you know, ended up having 3 babies, not 1. So she had triplets. So quickly worked out she was not going to be able to fill that role full time. So we shared it for a season, and then I ended up, taking over her role there. And even while I was there, I worked for the Brisbane Lions. So again, it sort of fell into my lap because I'd sort of done some voluntary work over at the academy. That physio then offered me a role with the Brisbane Lions in their inaugural year with the women's program. So I worked with her for a year, again, just a word of mouth, networking type role. I couldn't juggle both roles for very long, so I just did that for a season. And then a couple of years into, I think I'd been at 4 or 5 years at the Heat, and then the physio from the AFLW moved on. And I got a call from the CEO, and she said, we absolutely loved having you in the inaugural year, and we'd love you to come back and fill that head physio role. And then I guess with that, it's sort of grown with me, and now it's a full-time position. Wow.
Great story. I loved everything you said except the word lucky. So I got offended recently. Someone said, oh, you've been lucky in your profession. I think, lucky, really? You've put the hard yards in, you did some volunteer work, you were gracious and stepped in and helped out with Nikki. I know. Has she ever told you the story about the ultrasound where they went in and they go, oh, there's another one in there? And they nearly fainted. And then they said,
story.
And then they've gone, oh, there's another one in there. And that's another story on another day. That's a great, thank you for sharing that, Alice. And that's what you got to do sometimes. I mean, we get some entitled physios coming out saying, I'm going to work with the local club and I'm going to ask for X amount an hour and all the rest of it. And yeah, it'd be great. But sometimes you just got to build your resume, and sometimes you just got to put in the hard yards, and it gets noticed. Everything we do gets noticed. Jess, that's a big story to match now. I know you got the best background out of the group. Tell me, when did you decide, I would love to work full-time in professional sport, and what pathway did you carve out for yourself to achieve that?
Well, I was one of the ones back in high school that didn't know what they wanted to do after they graduated. And I'd always had a love for sport. I was a swimmer and did a bit of rowing and some netball. But when you associate sport with a profession, often physio comes to mind. So I decided to try that, and I was lucky enough that I picked right, and that in my undergraduate years, I was like, yep, definitely, this is where I want to be. And And then, so in our second year of the undergrad degree, you had to do sports trainer hours somewhere.
Yep.
And through my auntie, I had a contact at the Lions to do my sports trainer hours with the men's program. The women's program wasn't up and running then.
Yep.
And so I did that. And then once I graduated uni, the private practice I started at in a new graduate role, they allowed me to keep going. So I ended up doing 7 years of sports trainer work.
Mm-hmm.
And then through contacts, much like Alice, I moved to a different private practice, and those contacts there had asked if I'd be interested in the women's role.
Yep.
But prior to that, I'd also done 2 seasons with the under 18s academy in the female, and then I'd done 1 season in the boys academy under 18 as well. So I had that going for me to support myself moving into a more senior role, I would say. And yeah, they were looking for someone to support Alice during her season when she was pregnant.
Yes.
And yeah, word of mouth was how I landed the role with the women's. And a month later, one of the men's physios was leaving. And because I'd had 7 years with those guys, I contacted the head physio at the time, Peter Blanche.
Right.
And was like, I'd love to throw my hat in the ring here. It's only a part-time role and I'm only part-time with the women's. And he effectively told me I jumped the gun and they were going to offer it to me. So I consider myself lucky that I didn't necessarily have to interview for it. But I, like Alice, had done some hard yards, put in the work through an academy program.
Yes.
Kept contact. A lot of sport is who you know. So you just want to put yourself in those opportunities where you get to meet people who might be future employers.
Sure. Jess, another great story. Thanks for sharing. So you were a sports trainer at the Brisbane Lions, running around strapping ankles and giving water, and then you come back as one of their physios.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Well done. Was there much of a gap there between water bottle and physio?
No, it's funny. I actually, at the end of my final season as trainer, I said to the head trainer at the time, I need to go and pursue some physio opportunities, so this will be my last year. And it would have been a couple of weeks later that I got asked if I was interested in the women's role. And then it was a month after that that the other physio at the men's was leaving. So a month.
Good on you.
From one season trainer to physio the next.
Okay.
And the playing group knew me as well, so they were quite happy.
Yeah.
They knew my background, so it was a seamless sort of fitting into that team.
So you're a physiotherapist and you weren't too far above running out water to keep guys hydrated because you loved being involved in sport and you waited for an opportunity to open.
Yeah.
Gold. Well done. And that's what you got to do sometimes. You know what I mean? And some people couldn't be bothered filling up a water bottle for someone until they realise how important hydration is, particularly when you're playing in Brisbane every second week and in those sorts of conditions. Great stories. What I'd love to hear now, Jess, the men's team, they're halfway through their season. Alice, you're about to start your season, correct? Very soon?
Yeah, we're about 5 weeks into pre-season.
All right, I'd love to hear about a typical day or even a typical week. Alice, we'll start with you. The girls are in pre-season. Yeah. Yep. What's their training commitment and what's your commitment at those training sessions?
Yeah, it's actually evolved quite significantly this season. So previously, like you, we've been training in afternoons and into the night. And this is the first season that our commitment has become much more daylight hours. So these days of a morning, they'll have physio clinics. They'll come in and see us for triage or for treatment. Then the players will have a meeting. Typically, we'll often have our own meeting. And then we move into preparation for training. So they'll have lunch around that as well. Preparation for training is a lot of strapping. Footy's lots and lots of strapping demand. So we have casual physios that come in to support me with that as well as trainers. Strap them up, prepare them for training. They'll do a field session 3 days a week. And then post-training, classically, it's moving into a bit of recovery for the players, or they'll come and see us. That's when our needling window starts. We've got a bit of a culture for that now. So they'll come in for needling post-training. And then another 2 days a week, they'll do gym as a standalone session, which is probably something that's a little bit unique to us than the men's side.
Wow. Okay. That's a busy program. So now, not all the girls are full-on professional footballers, I believe. So how are they fitting in part-time jobs around that?
It's probably our first year of kind of being full-time. They've got a year-round contract now, although there's still, a fair chunk of the year, 4 or 5 months, where they're not officially required in at the club. But their commitment really is close to full-time now. There's at least 2 days a week that are full days, sort of 2 days where they could potentially work a little bit in the morning. They've got a day off 1 day a week where they could work, but then they'll also train on a Saturday. So there wouldn't be that many anymore that are working a lot of hours outside of it. I've probably got a huge portion that are studying, so doing a subject or two at uni. And then those that do work would be very casual these days, so a lot less hours than they previously had. And that's probably understating it for a few of the older players that they've got they're a bit further along in their career and are having to juggle both.
All right. And it's a good point, because when you work with those squads, load management is all very important. And what they're doing when you're not seeing them is vital. And especially at our footy club, the boys, particularly, a lot of apprentices, you know what I mean? So a lot of them can get to training at 5 o'clock because they're up at 6 a.m. on their feet on the work site all day. And we have to factor that into their load management, which becomes very difficult. You mentioned the amount of tape. Our budget for the women's team was almost double that of the men's team. I think it's got to do with the laxity and just the fact that they haven't had the years in the gym for that extra stability. But they love getting their shoulders taped, that's for sure. Jess, what about now? You're involved at all training sessions, correct me if I'm all training sessions and game day. Do you go to all games?
Yeah, so there's 3 physios in the men's program where the head physio does all of the AFL games, and myself and the other physio, we alternate through the VFL and AFL. Because for those who don't know, AFL, they have a fully fledged second side. So every game that AFL's team's playing, you've got a 2-side playing, either the same day or a day before or after. So always a game on a weekend. It just depends which one it's with.
Gotcha. So you're the only physio with the 2s?
Yes. In the 2s, there's only 1 physio for us on game day. Other teams do have 2 physios.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh nowadays to have 1 physio with a squad of 24 or something.
You have 4 trainers to help you with the strapping pre-game.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you get to be the decision maker on the day.
Yeah. Okay, which is always good.
Yeah, and then if it's an AFL game day, you've got the head physio there and 2 other docs. So you're strapping pre-game, treatment pre-game. You're there on the sideline, massaging, responding to any injuries. But an AFL game day, I'm not typically the decision maker, whereas a VFL game day, I get that opportunity to be the decision maker.
Okay,
have
so
that responsibility.
Speaking of decision making, I'd love to know about, are you guys involved in are there weekly medical meetings or player welfare meetings where you have to give your input?
Yeah,
so
sorry, you go, Jess.
Right, you're right. Men's have a meeting every Monday. So we do a triage clinic on a Monday after a game. And then that afternoon, the whole medical department, so high performance, including the head of performance, the sports science guys, the strength and conditioning coaches, physios, player welfare, dietitian occasionally. She's not full-time, so it depends when she's there. But we meet and we'll discuss post-game and the week coming. And then we'll keep touching base throughout the week as well if anything new pops up after a training session.
Alice, what about you? How do player welfare, player management?
Yeah, look, a little bit more difficult for us because there's only a core group of staff that are full-time, and most of our hours then are player facing. So we do have 2 meetings a week that are dedicated to that player welfare and high performance and medical that sit outside those hours. So with the core staff alone, and then we've got a rehab meeting once a week as well. But then to get around that, we just have to be really clear and clean with our communication. So we've got a lot of strategies to help with that as well.
Okay. So not so long ago, I was physio for Melbourne United, which is not a soccer team, it's a basketball team, and to play in the national competition. So we had a weekly meeting, and the doctor rarely attended. So he and I would discuss whatever we had to discuss prior, and I would, along with the high performance manager, we would head up that meeting. We would go through every player on the list, what issues, and the coach wanted to know in, out, any restrictions at training, likelihood, whatever. Who had the final say who has the final say on whether a player will play? So I'll give you an example. We would have a player and I'd say, look, ideally needs plantar fascia problem, needs to have this week off, and we'll manage him for the rest of the season. The coach says, if we don't win this week, there is no rest of the season. Can he play this week? And I said, look, he could play this week. We would have to limit his minutes, but you won't see him for another 2 weeks after that if we get him through this week, right? He's going to need a jab. He's going to need tape and monitoring. And the coach said, we're going to do that, okay? And obviously the player had to consent to that, but it was, if we didn't win this game, then there was no future. And so that was the coach's call. And then the coach sold that to the player, okay? The coach sold that to the player. How would that work in your settings, Jess? Who has the final say? How much is it the doc, head physio, high performance coach?
If it's to do with an injury, there would be a huge risk versus reward discussion between the head physio, the high performance manager, and the coach. But ultimately, it would be the head physio who would decide at this stage with the group that we have. They would be the one saying yes or no.
And why the head physio, not the medico? Has he been with the group long, or she been with the group longer?
More so contact time. I would say with the players, the doctor's not there all the time. So yeah, more that, and I think experience in the AFL.
Great. Alice, what about in your department? Who gets the most input?
Yeah, I would say it's actually a really good multidisciplinary team to work in.
Yes.
Everybody's voice is really important and relevant, and the risk reward conversation, as Jess and yourself just talked about, is delivered, and it's discussed as a team as well as with that player, that risk reward discussion. Ultimately, our coach, he's got a strength and conditioning background, so he's very understanding from a high performance and medical perspective. So he'll almost always take our advice. If we needed to, our medico can rule someone out on a medical basis, and I have to say I've never had to do that. Ultimately, we all arrive at a decision that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, good on you. Okay, and that's how it should be as well. So a mate of mine was the sports doc at Melbourne Football Club many years ago, and the high performance manager ordered that a player get an MRI. And he walked into the CEO and said, do you know your high performance manager just ordered an MRI? He goes, yeah. He goes, for a condition that I've managed every pre-season. It was shin splints that he just manages with one of the guys. That we've managed with load management, and all of a sudden he's been sent off for an MRI. He said, do you realise he can't refer for an MRI? And he goes, yeah, I'm aware of that. I need you to write the script. He said, you're telling me that an EP is telling me to write a script for an MRI that I don't believe the player needs. And he said, I'll write you out something else. And he wrote out his resignation and put it on the table. So that's when high performance managers were getting into clubs and probably given too much responsibility because they didn't have a medical background. I think a high performance manager has a great role to play. They need to have a very good health background, and they need to be working in a collaborative manner, as you've outlined, which is what I'd expect, obviously, at that level. Now, ladies, I know you're both bound by contracts. I'm not asking you to reveal any club secrets. I don't want you to lose your job over this podcast, although this podcast is pretty damn important, as we know. Injury prevention. What changes have you seen in injury prevention? And what are some of the key elements you think? Look, if a physio was out there wanting to work with a local club, they're not going to have access to the time and the resources that you have. But what are some of the things that a physio could do working with a local sporting team to assist with injury prevention? Jess, what do you think are some of the key elements in that area?
Something that's probably come more from that FIFA 11 plus and all of those research articles is the stability side of things in the week. So for a local club, trying to incorporate a little bit of strength in their warm up somewhere, some landing practice, hamstring wise. There's the whole Nordic protocol, but it really depends on what level you're dealing with there. But just trying to have something from a strength within the week that you just might have to be smart with how you filter that into their program. But mostly it's that stability, that landing work, which we still do every week. As much as the players might moan and groan about it, we still value stability. And it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing new. And I don't necessarily think we've changed injury rates too much if you look at the statistics. But yeah, it's what we want to keep doing. We believe in.
And are there any other monitoring going on during the week? Are people looking at hip range of motion, ankle dorsiflexion, glute strength, anything? What else is being monitored during the week?
We are probably a bit different to some other clubs. We don't necessarily have a routine model, although I do think the women's might be a little bit different with some of their stuff. The only thing that we are monitoring weekly is a groin squeeze for the men's, because groin pain is quite prevalent. And will action a change on that. If their squeeze is down at the start of the week, then we might change some of their change of direction drills within the week. And we're just monitoring whether that comes back up by the main training session on a Thursday. And then they'll regularly measure a Nordic strength. But otherwise, the S&Cs are monitoring stuff through their general gym program. But we're not doing a knee to wall unless somebody's had an ankle injury and we're seeing how that's going. We're not doing it in the healthy population, I suppose.
Understand. Alice, what about in your domain? Are there any markers that are being monitored on a regular basis?
In terms of physical testing, we don't do any monitoring or surveillance during the week, mostly because from an injury surveillance perspective, we haven't had any clear trends that would, like, for example, groin pain, as Jess talked about, that would need monitoring or be successful in the women's population. The biggest thing for us probably is your fatigue monitoring with the CMJ, that kind of stuff that the high performance guys do, and a lot of wellness monitoring. So our girls also wear whoops. So there's a bit of monitoring in that space, but probably the big one from an injury prevention perspective, like Jess has spoken really nicely to the exercise side of things, but it's a lot of education about sleep, nutrition, hydration, like your big rocks, and especially with women and the high rates of bone stress. Those are your biggest rocks. If you're getting them right, I think you'll go a long way in clubland.
Wow. Yeah, good one. Good point. All right, let's touch on recovery. So just for the audience's sake, the Brisbane Lions have, without a doubt, in the last 4 years, have been the most successful men's and women's sporting team, I would suggest, in Australia, with 3 premierships in the last 4 years. And the men's team's got a very good history. Did they win 3 in a row a number of years ago?
Back in the early 2000s, 3 in a row.
Yes, when Lee Matthews was coach. So regarding recovery, our clinic, we had the first ever hyperbaric chamber in Victoria. And when they played in Melbourne, I'd often get the phone call on the Sunday morning or the Saturday night, and I'd have to go into the clinic and they'd have 2 or 3 players lined up for me. Keep in mind, each chamber was an hour long, so it was not the most exciting Sunday morning of my life. But I did get to treat all the big names, Ackermanis and the Scott brothers and what have you. and they used to go into the hyperbaric chamber. So the Brisbane Lions were renowned for being ahead of the curve in many aspects. I think there was some publicity around even the boys being on drips at half time in the hot conditions to make sure they could get their hydration up. Without giving away too many secrets, what are some of the most common recovery techniques that are being used, Alice, in the women's program?
We sort of touched on it a little bit. The biggest ones we drive home is that nutrition, sleep, hydration, your big rocks, the one that there's evidence behind. And then all your extra stuff, they've got access to some great facilities here. There's an ice bath on site. There's also a hot tub. There's a whirlpool that they can do some recovery in. They've also, a lot of them will access saunas and compression. They'll use Normatec. Like, they've got access to all of that. But for us, we drive home that the 3 big rocks are there, and then they get to use a combination of active recovery as well as those passive modalities to top up their recovery.
Okay. And is it player-led? Like, do you, let me give an example. So when I worked with Melbourne United basketball team, not a soccer team, I had a recovery chart for them, and we had, I don't know, maybe like a dozen items up there, from an off-legs program to an ice bath to an ocean recovery to Normatec, and we would say they had to do 5 points of recovery per week, but during high load periods, because sometimes they'd play, double header, Friday night, Sunday, or whatever, and we would say you need 7 points of recovery. So part of it was an honesty system, and they literally had to tick it off. There was a big whiteboard in the room, and we didn't mind what they did, because some of the guys just would never get in an ice bath. So there was no point. Our imports, there's no way in the world you're going to get a Black American import into an ice bath. It just doesn't happen. So we never pushed it because the mental capacity was important. And if we took them to the ocean for a recovery, they wouldn't go in past their calves. And they'll go, well, what's the point of that? So we had to come up with, and sleep was a big one, but we had, apps on there for meditation and yoga and all sorts of things. So part of it was player-led, or do you guys dictate what they have to do? Jess, do you want to try that one? I don't mind. Alice, go.
We had a similar system to what you were describing years ago. These days, there's a great culture at our club for that, and this is something that the players will very much lead, and they'll often do recovery sessions together, and the older players will help the younger players explore different types of modalities, and I think this is something that they do really well.
Yeah, okay. Quick story.
I would second that with the men's group as well. A few years ago, having those posters up, everything. Now you've got a group that's been through it, and they're educating the younger ones coming through.
Yeah, I think treating your athletes nowadays like educated people is really important. And I think in the old days, this is what you have to do, and they were dictated to. Whereas now because they're all paid handsomely, I know it's in their best interest, and it's a very competitive environment. So years ago, we went over to the USA and we played Oklahoma City NBA team. Because I was in charge of recovery, I was keen to catch up with the physio and say, what do you guys do? And he said, oh, well, you can come to recovery tomorrow, anytime from 10. Well, okay, so I got there at 10 o'clock. Now, their facilities were amazing. Everything you said, plus some 2 chefs behind this kitchen, big menu up, hot, cold, sand, this, that, and the other, saunas, everything you'd think of. Anyway, there's no one there except me and the physio. I said, when do the players come in? He said, oh, you tell me. I thought, well, how can I tell you? This is your recovery program. So recovery was from 10 till 4. Players turned up if and when they wanted to, and did whatever they wanted to, and ordered off the menu. He said most of them just come in for a meal and a chat, and there was team there, a massage team to give them flush massages, whatever. I said, no structure. And he said to me, Robert, these blokes are getting paid tens of millions of dollars. He said, we had an Aussie physio here who tried to introduce, this is what you have to do, turn up at 10 o'clock, ice bath, whatever. And one of the senior players, who was on $80 million or something stupid, rang the owner, and they shipped the physio back to Australia. He said, they run the club. And I went, mate, I said, our recovery sessions go for 90 minutes. We meet down at the beach, we walk in the ocean, we do a stretch, and anyone with an injury comes back to the clinic and I treat them. And it's all done in 90 minutes. He said, I'm not sitting here for 6 hours just waiting for a superstar to walk in. But anyway, All right, let's go through a few things. Most bizarre player ritual. Any superstitions? I'll give you my one. I don't mind mentioning names. David Barlow played basketball for our club, and a number of years ago, he scored, I think, 32 or 33 points at 100%, never missed a shot, right? Which was a record. Those 33 points at 100%. And he wears the same jocks ever since. Now, a couple of seasons later, I'm doing it, working on his glutes or whatever, and the jocks are nothing but an athletic jock string. That's all it was. I said, Dave, what are you doing? He goes, oh, these are my lucky jocks. I went, really? You couldn't have made them lucky socks? I mean, what is that? What are you going to do when you can't wear these anymore? Anyway, so he wore the same jocks because he scored at 100% efficiency. Jess, don't have to mention names, although if you do, that's great. Any bizarre player rituals?
Not that I can think of that as bizarre. There was a player in his younger days, and he's still quite young now, but when he came to the club, similar, would wear the same pair of underwear.
Yeah.
To the point where there was just full of holes.
Correct.
So he's gotten over that.
Thankfully.
There's one of the key backmen just has one person that he likes to high five before he heads out, but it always has to be the same person.
Yeah.
But my first physio mentor, Peter, he was big on trying to rule all that out, particularly like using other people, because he was like, nope, you're not high-fiving me, because if I'm not there one week, you need to be able to perform without that. So trying to, without crushing what they want to do, trying to move some of those superstitions out of it. But yeah, nothing too crazy, unfortunately.
But before you answer, Alice, that's a very good point, Jess, working with elite sport, is that they can get connected to staff. And my role at Sandringham's been to oversee the medical team. And I would say, guys, it's just not healthy. So again, do you follow basketball? Do you know who Chris Golding is? Chris Golding, basketball? Just nod, yeah. Okay, so he's 2 Olympics, all the rest. Anyway, when he's going for his first Olympic squad, so I was his physio as such, okay? And he'd say, Rob, I'm going to fly you up. The training camps in Alice Springs, not Alice Walker, Alice Springs, and I want you there because I need to make the squad. And I said, Chris, okay, let's say you fly me up. A, you couldn't afford me. B, and you make the squad. What are you going to do wherever? I can't remember where the Olympics were, London or just, I can't remember. What are you going to do in London when I can't get there? I will cross that bridge when we get there. I said, right. So I'm going to help you to the biggest stage of your career, and you're going to all of a sudden rely on another physio. How about I just do a handover to the physio in Alice Springs, because they're the physio who's going to follow you through. And it took him a while to get over that. But it's a good example to any listeners out there. You can't be selfish in our careers in professional sport. And it's not about us. It's about maximising the athletic performance of the player and team. And whatever you have to do, you do that. And I loved what you said about your senior physio trying to get rid of superstitions. That exactly, if you're high-fiving the same player every week and that week's the guy's got a head cold, you're in trouble. Alice, any major superstitions in the women's team? This will be interesting.
No, not really in the women's team. They're pretty good. But I would say coming from cricket, that was lots and lots of superstitions in cricket.
Really?
They've all got all sorts of quirky ones, like the socks and jocks that you're describing, stepping onto the field with the same foot every time they step onto the field, walking in one direction of the field only when you're batting and the other way when you're bowling.
What?
Yeah, they've got all sorts of weird ones in cricket, I have to say.
Well,
no eating duck when you're in the middle of cricket season.
I actually accept that one. I'll accept that one. Especially not a goose. Well, I think I think, is it Rafael Nadal doesn't step on lines and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's all a bit bizarre, but I get it. All right. Let's run through a few more things and I'll let you guys get going. Alice, I think you recently went overseas as part of your role with the AFLW squad. Again, I know you're bound by confidentiality, but what were the objectives? Were they met, and were there any major take-homes you can share?
Yeah, so we picked the UK because women's soccer over there, or football as they call it, is probably a few years ahead of us in terms of the paid athletes and the structures around the athletes. So it's a perfect pitching ground for us. But also everything's really densely populated. So we could achieve in 2 weeks, we could visit so many facilities in a short period of time. And so we did that. We got across a number of football teams. We got to tennis. We got to the Royal Ballet. We also did cricket. And there was a number of objectives for us. This is our first season where a lot of our staff are, well, our core staff at least, are full-time. So some of it is about structures of our week, player monitoring, recovery strategies, scheduling. Some of it's about injury management for us, meeting structures, nutrition strategies. So there was so much for us about building a full-time program at a high level from programs that have been doing it for years.
Yes.
And I would say every place that we went to offered us something really uniquely different, from female athlete health strategies to systems and processes to injury management, rehab protocols to, as I said, nutrition strategies. We helped build our, we're building an electronic medical record at the moment, or an action through action apps, and a lot of it was about building that at a level that is at a high level straight away as well.
Wow. And what were you able to share with them? What did they gain from you meeting them, other than your beautiful personality? Go on.
It is interesting that you say that, because we did come away thinking, you know what, we're not actually doing things too badly, and we're doing it with a lot less resources. And in a way, because we got far less staff, we felt that we automate things really well, and we use technology to our advantage because we don't have the personnel for them. If they needed something done or a job done or something to be a bit more efficient, they just employed somebody new, just threw some money at another person. For us, we have to find ways to work efficiently with our small team.
Yeah. Well done. And look, traveling the world and sporting teams, it's amazing what you learn. And, a doctor I've worked with, who works with the Australian Ballet Company, and we were talking about plantar fascia, the role of orthotics, taping, this, that, and the other. And he said to me, well, with the Australian Ballet team, we haven't had a plantar fascia problem in 20 years. I said, why is that? He said, they start with 24 single leg calf raises every session. Been doing it for 20 years. I just need the rest of the sporting community to understand the role of gastroc strength in offloading your plantar fascia. He said, because they can't wear orthotics, and they won't, and they can tape their footies, but they're not going to they can't wear orthotics. So he didn't believe orthotics played a role at all. With that, you start strengthening up some gastrocs and some soleuses, and plantar fascia incidence drops down. I don't know if you know this, but it was a trip by a high performance manager with Collingwood, I don't know, 15 odd years ago, that changed our interchange system. So Mick Malthouse was the coach. They had a 2-year plan. They said, we have to finish top 6 this season to get finals experience. We want to win the flag next season. And they were 6 games in, and they were 2 and 4. And he said, we're not going to make the top 6. You've got 2 weeks, travel the world, and come back to me with some answers. He said, we're too slow, and we can't make them faster now that the season's started. And this guy went to NBA, went to Euro soccer, all this sort of stuff. It wasn't until he went to an ice hockey game and he saw how they interchange. I don't know if you've watched an ice hockey game, but they're on for 90 seconds. That's all they're on for, and they interchange. So he came back and he said, look, we can't make them faster in the middle of the season, but we can speed up the game by our interchange. And they went ballistic on interchange, and I think they were averaging 50 interchanges, and they took it to about 120. And that's when the AFL stepped in and brought in a rule that you can only have, is it 70 interchanges or something? So they brought in a rule because Collingwood were just swapping. There was just too much activity on the sidelines. So they changed the game by traveling and watching an ice hockey match. So, all right, let's wrap this up a few things. Now, you've won 3 premierships between you in 4 seasons. You're both gem team needlers. You and I know that the success of the team is being because you're a gem team needler. We know that. I don't need you to respond. So tell me, which players gravitate to you because you've got a needle in your hand, and which ones squeal like school children when you say to them, you want to be needler? You can name and shame if you want to. It's up to you. But you must have a following, because it's usually on one side or the other. Jess, tell me, how have the players gravitated to you when you've got a needle in your hand?
I'm not sure I'll name and shame specific players. but I can say from a cohort aspect, the Irish boys are pretty tough.
Yes.
They're happy to get a needle.
Okay.
And I've got a few regulars that I'll needle throughout the week.
Yes.
Whether that's for some glute tightness, TFL tightness. I've got a guy at the moment who gets headaches quite regularly, so we're trying to do a little bit that way. But it is certainly a staple within the week and a
Good.
staple in some players' routines.
Wait till you
There
do
are a few who are needle phobic though.
Sure. Well, wait till you do our advanced course and I'll teach you how to needle off C2. Alice, what about you? How are the girls gravitating to needles?
We've got so many of them that love the needles, and some of it, to be honest, is that we often finish late and we have a lot of players to see in a short period of time, and so needling is a really efficient way of seeing a lot of people. But over time, we've won them over, obviously, as GMT needlers. So I will give you two names, and an Irish player, and she wouldn't mind me sharing it, Orla O'Dwyer. She loves the needles, so she'll always find me. And then one that will run for the hills. She's an ex-player, and I know she wouldn't mind me saying. Gabby Collingwood. She always gave us a lot of sound effects. You could hear her from a mile away when she was getting needled.
So that's the player I would needle at 8:45 to shorten the rest of my list. So
yes, exactly.
Look, we might even do a part 2 because I'd love to talk to you both about the psychology of. I think the women's team, they've one runners-up, and the role of psych in this. I just don't want to keep, because I know you're busy people. Maybe we'll finish on this one. Guys, any famous quotes that you might have from it? Because you know what it's like. You become part of the team and it's 3/4 time at a grand final. You might be down, you might be competitive, and you're waiting for something that's going to just make the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. Are there any quotes you've had? I'll give you a couple. Just when we won 5 premierships in 7 years at Sandringham, which was amazing. 5 premierships in 7 years, and we got tagged the most successful club going around. It was before Brisbane Lions stepped in. And I remember the coach would just always say, guys, just do your job. That's all you got to do. And he was really specific with Jess, this is what you're going to do. This is what you've got to do, each player. To this day, I physio for my son's football team. He's 30 years old, and I'll strap their ankle, and at the end of each strapping, you talk about superstitions, I say to them, these are just amateurs, they get $100 a game. I've done my job, now go out and do yours. And there's a player or two that if I forget to say it, I go, hey, Rob, and I go, I've done my job, now go out and do yours. And I heard that first time 30 odd years ago. And the last one I'll give you is Chris Anstey. Hopefully you've heard of him. One of our decorated basketballers. He always said a premiership team comprises of a squad where no one person cares who gets the credit for the success. And I love that because I've applied it in my workplace, 26 odd staff. I would say that always to my support team as well. That's not about us and our egos. It is how can we combine to get the best results out of them. And so think about that. A premiership team comprises of a squad where no one person who cares who gets the credit for it. You've seen some selfless things on the football field. You cannot win a grand final without it. People who put their bodies on the line. And you've seen the converse as well. And the coach gets onto that pretty quick. Guys, anything that you've heard that had you going, that's why this guy or girl is the coach?
One that actually sticks with me. Oh, sorry, Alice. It comes from the women's.
Yes.
Craig says it all the time, and the girls say it too. It's we don't have to, we get to. Yep.
Nice. Alice, you got anything for us?
So that was exactly mine, and it's actually I think it was our CEO, a female CEO, who coined it originally, and the girls live and breathe it. Like it's everything is they just feel privileged to do what they do. They don't have to, they get to.
Yeah, good point. And guys, working in sport is almost the same as playing this, but to get paid to be involved with something you love to do is great. Guys, you epitomise our phrase of working outside the cubicle. You've carved out very successful careers. You've worked hard for it. No luck involved. You've done all the right things. Thank you for your time today. Hopefully you've inspired some people to follow a similar pathway. You're just living proof that not all superheroes wear capes. Thank you for your time, Alice and Jess.
Thanks, Rob. Great to talk to you.
thank you for joining me and listening to our GemT podcast of the month. I trust you found it insightful and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed being part of the interview process. Members get access to all our podcasts and playbacks, plus so many other features on our membership site. So if you'd like to be a member, by all means contact us. Thank you again for being part of GemT International and supporting us, and I look forward to joining you on our next episode of GemT Podcast.